How you doing? Thank you so much for stopping by and watching the ETG show. I appreciate you. I know that there's a lot of things you could be doing right now, but you took time out to have a good time. So we're going to be talking about everything we talk about here is profound. I try to have well-rounded conversations from my experiences. You could just call me Big Brother. Big Brother, I could be that to you too. Yeah, so I like to bounce stuff out around my friends and just have well-rounded conversations so that we come to you prepared. And so what we're going to be talking about is something that is personal to me. I feel like everyone on God's green earth experiences this in some degree. So what you do with it determines the outcome, so to speak. Is none other than, drum roll, unforgiveness. Why do I see that look on your face? Anyways, so like I said, I was having this conversation with a few friends, and one of them in particular, was saying to me that, Emmanuel, I think that you may want to bounce off this because this is something you're personally struggling with, because I know. And I'm like, okay, for me, as the Igbo man that I am, oh Jesus, don't tell me what I cannot do. I just said, okay, wait, what is this? Why can't I have this conversation? And she said, because you have XYZ that you're dealing with right now. I'm like, okay. You know what? And I sat and I said, okay, so these people are actually an impediment to what I want to do. And I'm like, wow. And I just said, you know what? I'm not giving these people any more power. And I reached out to them, and these are relationships that I had formed over the years. And like they say, it's the people that are closest to you that hurt you the most. And for me, because of the kind of person I am, I don't play with my relationships. I go hardcore. I'm that kind of person that will take a bullet for you and think about it later on. I'm like, I took a bullet for this person. And, I find that I, time after time, would get hurt. And for me, I'm a filler, so it's extremely excruciating. And, I'm checking my emotions. It feels like I'm about to... No, not on this show. Yeah. Anyway, jokes to the side. So I just said, you know what? I'm not going to give these people this much power anymore. And I did the dreaded. I reached out to them, and oh, the joy that fills my soul. I'm free. And I'm sure this is no jokes. If you sit back and look over your life, you will see that, because the Spirit of God just said to me, Emmanuel, this is what happens to you. And this is the conversation that I was having with God. And he said basically to me that the devil comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy. And he will bring elements and stuff in your life that will steal your time, your energy, your resources. And before you know it, time is gone. And that's the only thing that we have as a resource in this life, time. And where you should be doing stuff with your life and your giftings, you're over there in your feelings, hoping, drinking poison, expecting somebody else to die. And that's not going to be the case, because God doesn't work with your time. And you're over there saying, I pray and I hope that this happens to him or her. Guess what? In God's time, it may be today, it may be tomorrow, it may be in heaven or hell, whatsoever. You don't know. So are you going to hold yourself to ransom and give them all of that power? And 9 out of 10 times, the most painful thing in this life is that they're over there probably forgotten, and they've moved on, and you're here whiling away and just not existing. So I had a conversation with a few professional friends of mine, and one was with a medical doctor and the other was with a therapist, because I just wanted to understand, is there something that this emotion that unforgiveness does to me? Because I found that I was restless, I was somewhat toxic. I like to think of myself as a patient person, but I became extremely erratic. I would just, snap, and I'm like, yo, this is not me. What is going on? And so these are the conversations that I had, and we will talk right after this.
Hello, everyone. My name is Emmanuel Okenye. I am an internal medicine physician here in Oregon, and I've been asked by my friend Emmanuel to do a topic on forgiveness as it relates to basically the human body and how, from a medical standpoint, how forgiveness or unforgiveness affects us as humans, affects our health. And so I want to start by talking about, we probably pondered this topic for a while now, and we know that, whenever we are faced with hurtful events, hurt by a significant other, a deceiving friend, a betraying partner, unjustly blaming parent, in response to this, we experience emotions that can either trigger us to be unforgiving of the person, because we react with anger, hostility, a desire for revenge. Again, that will be unforgiveness. But as an alternative, we can decide to forgive the wrongdoer and relinquish any kind of resentment. Now, I want to talk about, of course, unforgiveness and talk about it in the context of 3 studies that were done. The first study was published by the Front Human Neuroscience Journal in 2013 by Emiliano et al. And he talked about a study where they examined the brain correlates of forgiveness using a functional MRI. And what they did was they had healthy participants induced to imagine social scenarios that described emotional hurtful events, and followed by the indication to either forgive the imagined offenders or to harbor a grudge towards them. And so the subjects rated their imaginative skills, levels of anger, frustration, or relief when imagining negative events, as well as following forgiveness. So what they found was granting forgiveness was associated with activations in the brain network involving, again, 3 specific regions of the brain, and one was called the precuneus. The other part of the brain was called the right inferior parietal regions of the brain, and the third was the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. Now, these 3 different areas of the brain were specifically, activated, and the pathway looked pretty interesting and different than when patients were unforgiving. And you can see the picture on the slide I'm going to be showing. And I thought that was very interesting because you can see, like, literally how the brain is processing information using the functional MRI. They could see these areas light up kind of differently than they would between patients that were forgiving and patients that were not forgiving. That's very interesting. Very interesting. The second study I want to talk about is a study that was done by Barry. Actually, it was done by Barry et al. It was published in the Journal for Counseling Psychology in 2001. And this study basically, this 39 patients were classified as either happy or unhappy with their relationships. Now, what they did was they measured something called a cortisol level. Now, cortisol, just before we go further, is a hormone that is actually stimulated in the body when you're in periods of stress. And in patients that are unforgiving, there has been, this study, of course, and multiple other studies have shown that it's associated with increased stress. And we know that, of course, you're more stressed. And so whenever you're stressed, this hormone called cortisol is released. Now, let's go back to the article. Now, it talks about this participant had to imagine for 5 minutes a typical scenes that were typical of their relationships, and they measured their salivary cortisol again. So what they found out was that participants in unhappy relationships had higher cortisol reactivity, again indicating higher stress levels following the imagery, versus participants that were in happy relationships. And so again, that's very interesting. But that's not too surprising in the context of the third article, which also looked at something called the unique effects of forgiveness on health, and was published. This article was published in 2005 by the Journal of Behavioral Medicine, and they looked at basically the heart rate and the blood pressure in patients that were unforgiven and as a trait, and in patients that did not have the trait of unforgiveness that were more forgiving. And they found out that in patients that had the trait of unforgiveness, their heart rate, their blood pressures were just significantly higher than patients that were not. Now we know, again, going back to cortisol, cortisol affects multiple organs of the body. And so in conclusion, I want to talk about the different areas of the body and how cortisol, the stress hormone, really modulating all of this affects the body. In the head, in the brain, of course, we know it causes anger. It causes changes in mood, depression, irritability, loss of energy, concentration problems, anxiety. In the heart, in the cardiovascular system, it causes increased blood pressure, like I talked about, increased heart rate, increased risk of heart attacks and strokes. It also a higher cholesterol level. In the intestine, it decreases nutrient absorption. It reduces metabolism. It decreases enzymatic output. It increases your risk of inflammatory bowel disease. That's your Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. Those are increased in patients with this increased cortisol with cortisol elevated cortisol levels. Also diabetes, which also goes into the fact that cortisol causes insulin resistance, and so these patients are also at risk for diabetes and metabolic syndrome. It also, in the reproductive system, it decreases testosterone levels, estradiol production. It basically leading to reduced fertility. It dampens the sexual behavior and causes loss of sexual drive. In the joints, of course, we know it literally affects the bones and leads to osteoporosis, and also affects the joints. Causes inflammation on the tissues and aches and pains, basically. Finally, in the immune system, it suppresses the effectiveness of the immune system to battle and recover from illnesses. Basically, leads to high levels of inflammation in the body, which causes a variety of chronic problems. So basically, we can see that in multiple systems in the body, cortisol, can be a big problem if it stays upregulated for long periods of time, especially likely could be also in this case associated with unforgiveness. So what I will say in conclusion is try to forgive, and remember that when you're forgiven, you're reducing your cortisol levels, which makes you a much healthier person and able to do what you have been created to do. All right, thank you.
So you see, medically we are killing ourselves. You are killing yourself. I'm killing myself. And all of these, anyway, I'm not going to mess up and just start to recount those what's it called, stuff you were saying about all of those chemicals that we. So there's you can have stroke, you can have all of these crazy ailments just because of the anxiety, all of these things that steals our lives. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a listen to what Toyosi says. Toyosi is a therapist, and she's going to elaborate on a few things that she feels or she knows how this impacts our life. See you in a bit.
Hi, my name is Toyosi Alamaja. I'm a marriage and family therapist, and I'm super excited to be here today to share a little bit with you guys about forgiveness and just the impacts of it and the benefit of really truly making that decision to forgive, right? So I just want to start by saying that often one of the biggest difficulties with forgiveness in itself is the fact that people often struggle with the notion of it, because when we forgive people, it feels like we're sending the message that what you did is okay. What you did is acceptable, and it's kind of removing that responsibility from that person. But in reality, I just want to clearly state that forgiveness is not removing responsibility or accountability from that person or dismissing the wrong and the impact that that may have had on you, but it's releasing yourself of the resentment and the possible desire for revenge, and just really releasing the grudge that you may have in your heart, because really there's so many benefits for you when you make that decision to forgive. So some of those things that are benefits to being able to forgive are, being able to go into your next relationship, in a much better place. Often when someone is resentful or they are struggling with really forgiving someone, it really has an impact on their mental health, right? Because you spend an extreme amount of time ruminating and consistently thinking about the person's actions, thinking about the things that have hurt you. And the reality is, when you think about those things over and over, it can cause anxiety, it can cause stress, it can cause hostility in your communication with that person or really people in general. And so what is found is that often, while that situation and that person, you may not encounter them again, it's impacting that person on a daily basis because they're consistently thinking about it. They're consistently, the memories of it are coming back over and over. And what happens? You're often re-experiencing the trauma, re-experiencing the pain of that situation. And so research states that when a person is able to forgive, they are often more likely to release themselves of that anxiety and that stress that comes with it. Research also shows that people who really struggle with unforgiveness often have higher blood pressure, right? Because of all that anxiety, because of all the stress. And so when you're able to release yourself from some of that, you're able to have lower blood pressure, right? And people who are able to forgive also show fewer symptoms of depression, right? So that is often depression can manifest itself as, poor hygiene habits, not wanting to be around people, isolating yourself, just really battling thoughts and feelings that, maybe the people around you are thinking negatively of you. And so it feels like it's easier to just stay at home and just be by yourself. But when you're able to forgive and release kind of the weight of your experience or the things that you've been through, you're able to better feel comfortable in social settings, right? And so another thing to know is that when someone is able to forgive, they're often likely to have a stronger immune system, right? So I talked about the fact that when someone is struggling with unforgiveness, they may have higher levels of anxiety, they may be more stressed, they may be experiencing hostility, and all those things may often impact, our eating. It may impact your sleeping. And so when someone isn't sleeping because they are ruminating over these things, consistently ruminating and thinking about these negative interactions and situations that have hurt them, often you're not sleeping. And when you're not sleeping, you're lowering your immune system, right? So when you're able to release yourself from that, you are more likely to have a better immune system and increased immune system because you're regulating your body properly. You're creating time for yourself, creating time for rest, right? And so forgiveness also finds that research also finds that people who are able to forgive often have a improved sense of self and an improved self-esteem, right? So when you hold on to that pain and you hold on to those experiences, often people internalize those things and they feel like it's their fault or they're the reason why they've experienced those things. And it's understandable that when someone does something to you, you can internalize that experience and feel like, oh, I've done something wrong. But really, it's important to allow yourself to know that, those things that were done to you were not your fault and it's not you, right? And so when we can really release the resentment and really release that unforgiveness, we are able to see ourselves in a better light because we can see the strength in ourselves that although this happened to me, I was able to move on. And even in that in itself, that increases someone's ability to view themselves in a better way and their self-esteem, right? So some of the effects of holding on to a grudge specifically is that someone likely is going to bring those feelings of anger, bring those feelings of bitterness into their next relationships, into multiple relationships around them, right? So while what may have started with one person may have not been impacting other things, but the more you hold on to that unforgiveness, you're going to be able to start seeing negatives and start to see those situations in other situations around you, right? So what may have been your reality for one circumstance now could possibly become your reality, and you're going to start to kind of see things in other situations, right? Often, like I said, this person often when you're experiencing unforgiveness, you are to the side, right? Because it's very hard to enjoy the presence and enjoy the present and enjoy the things that you're currently experiencing because you're often thinking about the past, thinking about how that situation may have impacted you. And often that means that when they're experiencing present day things that are positive and good things, because their mind still has that lens of unforgiveness, they're often not able to really enjoy and really be present in the positive situations in their lives now. And so what I do want to say is that if you are struggling with forgiveness, one thing you can do is really understand the value of it. And like I've said, I've stated all these ways in which it can really benefit you. And sometimes unforgiveness is something that needs to be processed in therapy, because maybe it was an extremely traumatic situation and it's hard to really move on from it without really discussing it and walking through it. So therapy is often a great place to start, really identifying this is what I need in this moment to find my healing and to move on from this. And I think that as you really begin to process that and understand that you're more than your experience, you're more than that situation where you may have felt like a victim, you'll be able to move forward in that forgiveness process. And so I hope that this was really helpful, and I hope that as you continue to listen to this, that this is something you'll be able to relate to your personal experiences. Thank you.
The devil is truly a liar. So our relationships so what basically we do is we have other people pay other people's debts. And you're anxious, you're miserable, your mental health is destabilized because you are experiencing all of these emotions. So I want to encourage you today, which I have done. I am free like a bird, I promise you. And that is because I have let these people go. Because here's what the devil did over time. He stole my time. He stole from me. And he doesn't necessarily have to come in person. He uses people. So I want to encourage you, if you can, reach out to these people and just let them go, let go and let God. And another thing is that sometimes people are ignorant. They hurting people hurt other people. So I'm not saying that they're not responsible, but I'm just saying that sometimes we just want people to be responsible, and it's not that important anymore. The situation, life has happened, so it's time to move on. Please, I beg of you, let go and let God, and be free, and just enjoy life the way God has planned for you to. So I'll see you on the other side, the winning side. And if you have any questions, feel free to inbox me and we can walk through this process. So if you want to reach out to the therapist, and you know what, find help, seek therapy, whatever you need to do to make yourself better. You know what, it's a journey, and I want you to know that I'm with you, I love you, I'm praying for you. Till we come your way next time, I remain ETG. Peace.